It's very great to be in the great city of Adelaide, and thank you for that warm welcome. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pay my respects to elders past and present. It's wonderful to be here with all of you in a state that has long been a leader in research, innovation and higher education. From defence to renewables, this is a place where universities are driving real change. My thanks to Jeff and the whole Unimutual team for making today possible. I know how much work goes into these events. Only a few weeks ago, Universities Australia held its annual Solution Summit in Canberra, and I think I'm still recovering. But it's great to be here today, and I can already see some familiar faces in the room. I must admit, I wasn't particularly familiar with Unimutual until I met Jeff a couple of weeks ago. He explained the core functions of the business, risk protection and management. In a lot of ways, it's not too dissimilar to what Universities Australia provides our members. We advocate for a strong and fair policy settings and full and proper funding for universities. This is all to ensure our institutions have the strongest possible foundation from which to operate. There is considerable risk in this not happening, which is why we seek to do what we do. And without a firm footing, our universities would struggle to do what they do. They educate more than 1 million students each year. They undertake critical research and development, and they support the communities they call home. But any reduction in or impact on these activities is not just a risk for universities. There are far greater implications, and they extend well beyond lecture theatres and campus grounds. Without a firm footing, our universities, our nation, would struggle to grow and prosper. That's because the students we educate work in and fuel every sector of the economy. The R&D we undertake drives Australia's progress, and the communities we support are stronger for it, socially and economically. For these reasons, our institutions are worthy of full and proper support. They are worthy of bipartisan political backing, particularly in an election year. They should be the focus of good policy, not politics. Regrettably, this is not always been the case. You might have heard me and Universities Australia and local Professor David Lloyd making this very point before. We've both spoken at the National Press Club in the last 6 months. We both use that national platform to call out the politicisation of universities and to call for full and proper support of our institutions for the nation's benefit. If you accept that universities exist to serve all Australians, the case for investment is irrefutable. They do this by making the Australian economy $185 billion larger and our standard of living higher. They do it by investing in new products and generating original ideas to make our lives easier and safer. Yet these benefits sometimes seem lost on, or at least ignored, by policy and decision makers. Take what our sector is facing right now. We have been underfunded for years by successive governments. The current government is bidding to limit international student numbers. The federal opposition, meanwhile, is threatening deeper cuts than Labor to this important sector. Changes in the foreign policy landscape are threatening our research partnerships. Vice-Chancellor salaries and university governance are now in the political crosshairs. and social cohesion issues continue to play out on campuses and in the wider community. Please don't think that I'm suggesting that universities are above scrutiny. Not for a second. Our sector is not perfect, far from it. These are really important issues to work through, and we will continue to work through them. Our responsibility to provide safe and respectful campuses is not something we shy away from. It's our duty as educators and employers. At the same time, we can't lose sight of or put off the major policy discussions we need to have. Let's consider what's happening in the world right now and why universities matter. We are in a period of great economic, technological and societal change. The push towards a net zero economy is happening at pace. New technologies like artificial intelligence are reshaping us, and geopolitical shifts are changing our way of life. There are both opportunities and challenges that come with these changes. Opportunities we must embrace and challenges we must overcome to succeed as a nation. So why do Australian universities matter to this task? Because they have everything to do with embracing the opportunities and overcoming the challenges in front of us. Australia's universities educate the skilled people and undertake the research our economy needs in greater supply. But just don't take my word for it. The Tech Council of Australia says we need 1.2 million people in tech jobs by 2030. Engineers Australia expects a future shortfall of up to 100,000 engineers. This year, according to the government, we're already 4,000 teachers short of where we need to be. The government also estimates a shortage of a staggering 123,000 nurses by 2030. These skilled people are educated at our universities. The skilled people we need to design and build new infrastructure for a growing population. Skilled people to care for sick and ageing Australians. Skilled people to navigate rapid technological change. Skilled people to guide the transition to a clean energy future. And so many more skilled people to ensure our economy grows and our country prospers. We're in Adelaide today, so let's consider why skilled people are so important to South Australia. 30 minutes north of here in Osborne, this is where you'll find the Australian home of AUKUS. 4,000 workers will design and build the submarine construction yard. A further 5,500 workers will build the nuclear submarines. Most, if not all, of these jobs are highly skilled. That means South Australia must have highly skilled people to draw on. Without them, we will not get Australian-made nuclear-powered submarines patrolling our waters. AUKUS depends on them, and so does the defence of our nation. So too does South Australia achieving its 100% renewables target by 2027 and completing its new $3.2 billion women's and children's hospital. These projects of the future all hinge on a highly skilled workforce. Let's also consider the Whyalla Steelworks, a South Australian icon and the recent recipient of a $2.4 billion government bailout. Whyalla is critical to sovereign Australian steel, and Whyalla steel is critical to our nation's future. It is used to build railways, bridges, schools, hospitals, transmission lines and defence assets. But the steel is not much use without skilled people to bring these projects to life. Skilled people educated at our universities, including those right here in South Australia. The University of Adelaide, the University of South Australia. These great institutions will soon combine as the new Adelaide University. And I'll add, if anyone's been to my home state or city of Melbourne lately and caught a train, you can't escape the Adelaide University branding. So I think there's a great migration play on the cards from Victoria to South Australia. But I can't forget one of my favourite universities, Flinders University. 3 universities in South Australia, 3 wonderful members. And as I've said, we need more of skilled people in this state and in this country. More engineers to design infrastructure projects long before the first sod is turned. More IT specialists to protect us online. More teachers to shape future generations. And more health professionals to care for an ageing population. A recent review of Australia's higher education system laid bare the scale of this challenge. Estimates show we need to educate 1 million more domestic students each year by 2050. That's 1.8 million students a year, more than double the number currently studying at university. We cannot take this task lightly. This is what our economy demands, and it's what our future prosperity depends on. The economic dividend alone is eye-watering. The government tells us reaching this target could add as much as $240 billion to the economy by 2050. That's a $20,000 boost for Aussie households, including the 723,000 households here in South Australia. But if we're to meet Australia's skills challenge, we need our universities to be match fit. And to be match fit, we need the full and proper support of government. We have some work to do to get us there. Right now, our sector is not the picture of financial health. Most universities are in deficit compared to only 3 in 2014. Back then, Australia's universities collectively posted a 6.8% operating surplus. By 2022, this had deteriorated to a collective deficit of 3.6%. Average Commonwealth funding for student places fell 8% in this period. This drop can largely be put down to the much maligned Job Ready Graduates package. This change in policy altered fees for students and reduced funding for universities. Today, we have nearly $1 billion less for student places each year under this funding system. A funding system that is not delivering on its stated intent of shifting students into areas of national priority. The same areas Australia is desperately crying out for more workers. If we are to ever meet Australia's future workforce needs, our universities will need to grow physically. We'll need more classrooms and laboratories to educate 1 million extra students each year by 2050. Sadly, universities no longer receive government support to upgrade campus infrastructure. This is a result of the bipartisan decision to end the Education Investment Fund. In 2019, this stripped our sector of nearly $4 billion in dedicated funding for infrastructure. The fund helped build facilities right here in Adelaide, places where researchers are working to solve agricultural, defence, health and mining challenges. We're also being asked to do more with less research funding. Government investment in university research has never been lower than it is right now. Meanwhile, Australia's overall investment in R&D sits at just 1.66% of GDP. That's a long way behind the OECD average of 2.73%. R&D is the engine room of Australia's future. It drives productivity, economic growth and progress. Universities Australia has called for it to be at the centre of our country's productivity agenda. we will fall further behind in the global race to develop new ideas and products for as long as it's not. Consider the important work happening at universities right here in Adelaide. AI tools developed at the University of Adelaide are protecting Australians from misinformation. Researchers at the University of South Australia are fast-tracking cancer treatment for children. And at Flinders University, teams are pioneering new ways to ensure healthy pregnancies. This is life-changing stuff. It's important to Australians, and so it should be important to our politicians. Our researchers need and deserve their full and proper support. Our universities need and deserve their full and proper support. Our sector has now, until recently, used international student revenue to cover Commonwealth funding gaps. But the ongoing bipartisan attack on our international education sector no longer assures this. And if the major parties are going to kneecap a once reliable revenue source, we need their full and proper support. I know the South Australian government came out strongly against international student caps, and I want to thank Premier Malinauskas for this. I also want to acknowledge former Premier Stephen Marshall for his ongoing and strong support of this sector in his time in office. South Australia's universities and economy need international students. Australia's universities and economy need international students. It's timely that we have a federal election coming up. In a federal election year, it's high time the major parties come to the table to focus on policies, not politics, to support our higher education system and to provide the full and proper support our universities need to deliver for the nation. We need to educate 1 million extra students each year by 2050 for Australia's benefit. We can't do that with a funding system that penalises students and punishes universities. We can't do it without investment in our campus facilities, and we can't do it without adequate funding for our critical research and development activities. Universities Australia has already called on the next government to scrap the Job Ready Graduates package and work with us as a priority to set new course fees. We've also called to re-establish the Education Investment Fund and to raise its investment in R&D and lift the PhD stipend rate from $33,000 to $36,000 so our best and brightest aren't doing critical research while they're living in and around the poverty line. These are measures worthy of bipartisan support to ensure our universities are on a firm footing for the future. To support Australia's interests and to help the next federal government deliver its priorities, to build a stronger economy, to deliver affordable and reliable energy, to support strong and sustainable communities, to deliver cheaper medicine and quality healthcare, and most importantly, to leave no Australian behind. These are shared priorities of the major parties, and our universities matter to their delivery. Therefore, our universities matter to all Australians. They are worthy of full and proper support. Thank you for the opportunity today. I'm happy to. I know you all. I was so serious before, so feel free to ask some more questions, and I'm happy to talk about things that I alluded to, Accord and other measures that are happening in and around the sector.
Click on the agenda, click on this session, and then click on Q&A. But while you're all managing to do that, I thought I might throw one of my own questions.
Yes.
And that relates to universities. Sorry. thought while we get the questions on it, hopefully they're going to appear up on the screen, but while we wait for that to develop, I thought I'd throw in one of my questions, and it's regarding international students and the approach now that universities are taking to establish international campuses. And I think every week you see another announcement about another university establishing a campus in India, is the latest. So what's UA's position on that approach of universities?
Well, I'll answer it as a long observer of this, right? Because Universities Australia won't mandate offshore campuses, but I've been around a long time, and my old gig where I brought the fabulous University of Newcastle into the ATN, a great champion, Newcastle, of transnational education with campuses in, well, at least Singapore I've been to. Offshore delivery of education is an essential part of our engagement strategy, particularly in ASEAN. And this is something that Nick Moore, who was the special envoy into ASEAN, and about a year ago we celebrated the 50th anniversary of ASEAN in Melbourne. And this was central to the discussions, right? So Australian know-how, Australian qualifications and quality education, both in, I might add, both in university and vocational, is critical for the region. And if we deliver it offshore, it can be at a more attractive price point. There are wonderful universities that have a number of campuses. I think about RMIT and Curtin, who teach half of their international students offshore. Monash University is probably the major group of 8 university that has an offshore presence, and as do many other universities. But what I will caution about it is it's not a wholesale transfer of onshore to offshore. The pricing is different. It's often done collaboratively in partnerships. I know Swinburne University has a partnership with the state government of Sarawak to deliver in Malaysia. That provides them essential support. Some universities can't bring any dollar profit back into Australia, so that they're restricted by government policies. The Philippines is an untapped market. I lived there for a number of years when I was working with the Asian Development Bank, but they have 60% local ownership requirements. So there's some major kind of impediments to delivering on that, but I think the future is bright. We do have to think as universities about the cost base and how we deliver it. And the big impediment, I think, is labour mobility. Because if we want to give young people who are hungry for skills in the region an Australian qualification, we need to make sure that if they're attaining that offshore, they can use it in Australia and beyond. So I think there's a lot more work to be done on qualifications recognition as well. This is an area, and I could nerd out on transnational education all day. I won't. But what I will say is I've heard many ministers stand up and say, oh, it's all about just do it offshore. It's not. And they often cite the UK example of having 50% of their international students offshore, but that is predominantly in English language. And Australian offshore is about full campus experience and full degrees and research. I don't know if any of you have been to any of the Singapore campuses, but, if you go to Curtin, it looks like a campus of Curtin. It's doing research, it's doing, these are important and full campus experiences, and they're run like full campuses. So we have a different model in Australia. So I'd caution about saying it can go very quickly. The Gift City thing in India is very exciting, and I know Deakin and Wollongong. I think I won't claim who went first because I don't want to pick a winner, but simultaneously were the first two by Prime Minister Modi to establish in his hometown. That overcomes the local ownership laws in Gift City. So it's a special economic zone. I wish them well, and I hope it'll do well. So we're going to keep a close eye on it. One thing I will add, though, and it is the reality, is that the sledgehammer approach to student visa processing last year completely undermined our market diversification efforts and sentiment in international education for Australia. So we've got a lot of damage to fix. Not so much as Canada, but we've got a bit in Australia to do to overcome.
Okay, so I look to the Unimutual team. We're not getting any... Sorry. You go.
Yes, I'm looking at my colleague because I have to go on scary 5AA at like 10:05 a.m. or something. So
I just said
jolt over the High Marsh Square at some point.
So you might get bowled up in morning tea because I've got lots of questions coming through from multiple people. So one of them is, given the growth in online learning, what does the campus of the future look like?
Great question. And one thing I think we learnt from the debates 10 years ago when they were reviewing the demand-driven system is online education ain't cheaper. I know this because I was working at Swinburne at the time, and we established OES to deliver, and I'm sure many of you know OES quite well as Swinburne Online at the time. A fully fledged online campus experience is not a cheaper alternative, and I will stress that till I'm in my deathbed with policymakers, because the amount of interventions and human capability that's required to deliver an excellent world-class experience is not a cheaper experience. But what does the campus look like? Great question. Couple of things though, I just add, after COVID, we've noticed a little bit of a lean back towards the campus experience, particularly for students who had that disrupted high school experience. So I think the future campus will look like, there will always be, hopefully, I think, a university campus in a physical sense, and the virtual sense will be an important development. I was in Bangalore about a year ago and saw what they're doing with EdTech in India. It's amazing, but the virtual experience will be a new part of what we do. But we do need capability and support for that, so it's not just bricks and mortar in the future. I think it's really emerging, and it's emerging fast. But I think my hope is that for the hope of good development of good citizens in our country, that we continue to have campuses. It sends a really strong signal that we have strong physical presence in our cities and regional towns and rural areas. So I hope there's a combination.
Thanks, Luke. Another question is, how does Universities Australia see the role of residential colleges within the sector?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. There's so many different historical forms of residential college, and I think often our policymakers respectfully think residential college, and they think, Ormond College or St John's or one of the big ones that I'm not familiar with the names in Adelaide. I'm sorry, but increasingly student accommodation is purpose-built student accommodation by private providers in our cities, and they're excellent. I've been to many of these as part of our coalition of the willing to support, or to try and oppose the sledgehammer to international education in the last 12 months. And they're beautiful, but they are fit for purpose, and they're fit for purpose for student accommodation. I'd add that the debate around housing supply in Australia is distorted and attributed to international students who have a very different demand for student accommodation. The really sad thing about student accommodation investment is Australian superannuation funds refusing to invest in it. And when Singaporean funds are doing it in Australia, I wonder what's wrong with Australian superannuation funds. I do sit on the Super Members Council, and we're having a meeting in 2 weeks, so I might take it up with them as well. But residential colleges and the traditional affiliated residential colleges, there's an affiliation. And so we've been working with TEXA around this and things about, how we survey students on campus for their experience, National Student Safety Survey, which we're about to undertake again, where the campus begins and where the residential college begins is a little bit complex. And I think we do need a little bit of regulatory reform around that.
Just on that, another question is, how do we change the rhetoric in the media that international students are the main cause of the housing crisis?
Elect more people like Peter Malinauskas and Stephen Marshall, in my view, and Perrottet and his treasurer before that in New South Wales. Strong state government support for this sector has been really, really valued in the last, particularly since COVID. And it doesn't matter what colour they are, they can fight their own side in Canberra. That's the first thing. Second thing is we need more champions. We need more champions in the business community. 132,000 nurses and, 100,000 engineers isn't going to come just from domestic training. And so we need the business community to work with us, which they have pretty strongly over the last 12 months, and I'm deeply grateful for that support, but we need it to continue. I do have a little bit of a bone to pick with the Australian Industry Group, who thinks that, student caps is important because they want to train more Australians. That is absolutely a valid point. Australians should be trained first in our system. But at the end of the day, we do need international students and we need workers. I know you need workers here in South Australia, and recently I was in Darwin. They desperately need workers, and part of that is fulfilling the ambition that the previous territory government with the Commonwealth did, was to look at 8,000 international students at Charles Darwin University in Darwin and will help with the flow on for workers in that economy. Yeah, there's parts of the country that are crowded and people are grumpy about infrastructure, but it's nothing to do with international students. We need a really fair income discussion, I think, about the actual pressure on the migration system, and taking a complete sledgehammer, but also a laser-like focus on only the international students ends in disaster. And we've seen this play out already. Canada and the UK have had the boom and bust approach to it. We've had a pretty bad approach to it in the last 12 months, but I'm hopeful we can turn a corner.
Another question, how dependent is the sector on offshore research funding? And will the change in the US administration impact Australian universities?
Well, I was on radio last night to talk about this. I'm deeply concerned about the interventions from the US. The US is our largest foreign funder of research in the Australian system. It was more than $510 million last year, provided by American agencies. And for an ally to become an unreliable partner is deeply concerning. So that's the first thing. Second thing is Australia does research globally. We're a trading nation. We're an open, globally engaged nation. We're a nation of migrants. We can't and shouldn't do our research in isolation from the rest of the world. What benefit would that have? So that's the second point. But the third point is we do need to think about our own sovereign capability. And if anything, the pandemic showed us is how exposed we were. So we need to shore up the baseline of what we do here, but we need to continue to do it globally. Australia is 0.3% of the world's population, but undertakes 3% of the R&D globally. That is a great thing. We're hitting above our weight, so to speak, but we need to do more globally. And if regretfully and concerningly, the Trump administration is becoming an unreliable partner across a range of activities, I might add, for Australia, then we need to look elsewhere. And I think we should look in our region, and we should look a bit more closely to Europe. And I will continue to call out the federal government for ignoring an engagement opportunity with Horizon with the EU.
Great. Thanks, Luke. Another question is on government investment in the university sector has clearly declined. How does this compare to investment in vocational education and TAFE? And are we seeing imbalance considering the future skills needed?
TAFE needs all the support it can get. And I'd never ask for $1 to go to universities above TAFE, ever. And having worked in a dual sector university, I'm absolutely rock solid with my friends in the broader tertiary education sector. We need strong public TAFE, strong public universities complemented by great vet and training providers and private higher education providers. Vet's gone through a really tough time from poor state government decisions, contestable funding models that haven't worked. My home state of Victoria is a prime example of that. Interventions from the Commonwealth, vet fee help, vet student help. TAFEs need solid infrastructure support, which they got through the Education Investment Fund, like universities did, and they need really solid per student funding. I'm a strong supporter of that, but would never for a moment advocate for $1 to go to universities over TAFE. We need co-investment in both sectors, and we need parity of esteem across those two systems.
Thanks for that, Luke. I think this might be the last question because we're just about coming to the close. If we are to double the number of graduates per year in order to meet the skills demand target, how do you think the government, how is the government going to achieve this if our funding remains capped?
Well, we won't. That's the first thing. We just won't. So we need to grow the system. But my argument is, and I made this at the press club as well, we can't grow the system from the current funding architecture system. It's not working. It's not fit for purpose. The Commonwealth Grant Scheme was designed in the 1990s and, on the back of an envelope with support of the Democrats in the Senate in 1996. They fiddled with it. Then they fiddled with it again in 2005 with the Nelson reforms, and they fiddled with it again with job-ready graduates. We need to fix it from the base up, and then we need to grow. And that is going to require more investment, especially if they're going to curtail our international student revenues. And so it's a hard and tough conversation. I've made that point both to the opposition and to the government, particularly the opposition who want to continue a bidding war on international student caps. if you don't want us to have that revenue that not only supports R&D, I mean, there's a misconception it only supports research. It actually underpins the world-class teaching and learning experience of Australians as well. If you're going to curtail that, then we need to think about how do we top that up. But I would be hesitant just to say top it up and keep going, because JRG is not delivering. 16% decline in what we got for STEM disciplines, and we need more STEM students. How on earth did they come up with that figure? A dodgy Deloitte report that was said, please do not use this for a funding system. Now, all due respect to Deloitte, it was a dodgy process because it wasn't done properly. We need to get the cost base right and then work out what the student pays and then go from there. But it has to be a priority. 26 universities in deficit. I mean, we can't go from there. We are 3 or 4 budgets away from looking like what state-based TAFE systems looked like about 5 years ago.